Sorry, we're closed. You'll have to come back when we're open.
Not until we get what we came for.
Sergeant Wilson walked to the counter and slapped a folded piece of paper onto the counter in front of Scarlett.
That's community safety assessment fee. Think of it as the cost of staying out of trouble. $800 a month.
Officer, I'm not paying you $800 a month for nothing.
You know, businesses that refuse to cooperate tend to have bad luck. Fires. Code violations. Funny how that works. So keep talking like that, and you'll find out how expensive nothing can get.
What Sergeant Wilson didn't know was that he had just tried to extort an ex-Marine who had spent a lifetime staring down far greater threats than him. Scarlett Adamson counted the register twice, the way she always did. 22 years old, this store. Her father built it with his own hands, board by board, before the cancer took him last spring. Now it was hers. Every dollar in that drawer meant something. She locked the front door for the night. Or she meant to. The bell above it jingled first. 2 cops walked in. One older, gray at the temples, badge polished like he'd shined it himself. Sergeant William Wilson, his name tag said. Behind him, younger, quieter, Officer Ryan Tedford, who stopped by the door and just stood there, arms crossed, watching. "We're closed," Scarlett said. "Not for us, you're not." Wilson smiled like that was funny. He walked up to the counter, slow, easy, like he owned the floor under his boots. He set a folded piece of paper down in front of her and slid it across with 2 fingers. Scarlett didn't touch it right away. She'd learned that in the desert. Never grab something before you know what it is. "What's this?" "Community safety assessment fee." Wilson said it smooth, like he'd said it 100 times before, in 100 other stores just like hers. "Comes out to $800 a month, cash. Due Friday." Scarlett unfolded the paper. No department letterhead. No signature. No stamp. Just a number, typed out, like a bill for nothing. She looked back up at him. This isn't real. Real enough. Wilson leaned one elbow on her counter, right next to the gum rack her father used to restock every Tuesday morning. Think of it as insurance. Bad things happen around here. Break-ins, fires. Inspectors show up and find things they don't like. He shrugged, easy, like he was talking about the weather. Be a shame if any of that happened to a nice little shop like yours. Scarlett felt her pulse pick up, but her face didn't move. She'd stood in worse rooms than this. She'd carried men twice her weight out of burning trucks, while bullets cracked past her ears. A man in a badge leaning on her counter wasn't going to be the thing that broke her. "I'm not paying you $800 a month for nothing," she said. Wilson's smile dropped, just a little. Just enough to show her what was underneath it. "It's not nothing," he said. "It's protection." "From who?" "You." Tedford shifted by the door. Wilson didn't answer right away. He straightened up off the counter, looked around her store slow, the shelves, the register, the little security camera bolted above the front entrance, pointed square at the door. "You're new to this," he said. "Owning a place. Running numbers. Dealing with people like me." He said, "People like me," like it was a warning label. "Things happen to shops that don't cooperate, Miss Adamson. Fires happen. Inspections happen. Customers stop coming around when word gets out a place isn't safe." He let that last word sit in the air a second too long. Scarlett stared at him. 2 tours. 2 tours in a war zone. And this man thought a folded piece of paper and a smug voice was going to make her shake. It didn't. "Get out of my store," she said. For a second, nobody moved. Tedford's eyes flicked to Wilson, waiting on him. Wilson looked at Scarlett like he was deciding something. Deciding whether she was worth the trouble, or whether she'd learn her lesson the easy way or the hard way. Then he smiled again, cold this time, no warmth in it at all. "Friday," he said. He tapped the counter twice with 2 fingers, right on top of the paper. "Think about it real hard before then." He turned and walked out. Tedford lingered one more second, staring at her before he followed him into the parking lot. Scarlett watched through the front window as their cruiser pulled away, taillights fading down the block. She didn't move for a long moment. Then she picked up the paper. No letterhead, no name she could trace, nothing that would hold up anywhere, and carried it to the back office. She opened the small floor safe her father used to keep the real cash in, the one only family knew about, and locked the paper inside it. She stood there another second, staring at nothing, jaw tight. Whoever Wilson thought he was dealing with, he had no idea. Scarlett Adamson had faced down worse men than him in worse places than this, and she had never once backed down. She wasn't about to start now. 2 days later, Scarlett's delivery truck disappeared. She'd parked it in the loading zone behind the store, same spot she'd used for 6 years, same spot her father used for 15 before her. She stepped out back to unload a shipment of bread and milk and found nothing but an empty stretch of asphalt and a yellow parking ticket stuck under a rock where the truck used to sit. Towed. No warning. No notice taped to the door. Just gone. She called the impound lot, and the man on the phone told her it would cost $200 to get it back, plus storage fees piling up by the day. She paid it. She didn't have a choice. The truck carried half her weekly stock, but her hands were shaking with something colder than anger by the time she hung up the phone. That afternoon, a health inspector showed up. No appointment. No call ahead. He was a thin man with a clipboard who moved through her store like he already knew what he was going to find before he found it. He pulled cans off the shelf, checked dates that were printed clean and correct, and wrote citations anyway. He said her cold case was running 2 degrees too warm. It wasn't. Scarlett had checked the thermometer herself that morning. He said her hand-washing sign was posted in the wrong spot. He wrote her up for expired product that had 2 more weeks on the label. Scarlett didn't argue with him. She learned that fast. Arguing just gave him more reasons to write. Instead, she pulled out her phone and photographed every citation, every shelf, every date stamp, the same way she used to document damage after a convoy hit. Cold, careful, building a record instead of a fight. The inspector left with his clipboard full and didn't look back once. That was Tuesday. By Wednesday, Tedford started parking outside. He didn't come in. He didn't need to. He just sat in his cruiser across the street, engine idling, staring through her front window for an hour at a time. Customers noticed. An older woman who'd been coming in every Sunday for years walked halfway to the door, saw the cruiser, and turned around instead. A man buying cigarettes asked Scarlett under his breath if everything was okay, like he already suspected the answer. Foot traffic dropped that day. Not by a lot, but enough that Scarlett felt it in the register total when she closed out that night. Enough that she understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't random. This was pressure, applied slow and steady, the kind meant to wear a person down before Friday ever came. She was still standing behind the counter, staring at the empty street where Tedford's cruiser had finally pulled away, when the bell above the door rang. A woman walked in, younger than Scarlett, sharp-eyed, a laptop bag slung over one shoulder. Scarlett Adamson? Depends who's asking. Natalie Faber. I write for the Weston Ledger. She set a business card on the counter, the same spot where Wilson had set his folded paper 2 days before. I've been covering small businesses on this block, the ones that closed. Scarlett went still. How many? 5 in the last 2 years. Natalie said it flat, like a fact she'd repeated too many times already. All black-owned. All shut down not long after run-ins with the same police unit. I've been trying to find someone willing to talk about it before it happens to them, too, instead of after. Scarlett looked at her for a long moment. Then she thought about the towed truck, the fake citations. Tedford's cruiser parked across the street like a threat with a badge on it. I'm not the first, she said. It wasn't a question. No, Natalie said. You're not. But you might be the last one who gets to stop it. Scarlett picked up the card and turned it over once in her fingers before setting it down beside the register, next to the folder where she'd already started keeping copies of every photograph, every fake citation, every piece of proof that something was very wrong on this block. And it wasn't wrong by accident. "Come back tomorrow," Scarlett said. "Bring what you've got." "I'll bring what I've got." Natalie nodded once, like a deal had just been struck, and walked back out into the evening. Scarlett stood alone in her store, the folder heavier in her hands than it had any right to be. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. That night, after Natalie left with a promise to come back the next day, Scarlett didn't go home. She stood in the stockroom instead, staring up at the shelving, thinking about the folded paper locked in the safe and the towed truck and the fake citations stacking up in her folder. Wilson had threatened to find something back here. Contraband. Something that would let him shut her down clean. No questions asked, no proof required beyond his own word. Fine. If he wanted a show, she'd give him one he couldn't argue with. She'd installed cameras before. Small ones, cheap ones, back when break-ins were a problem some nights after close. She still had one in a drawer, untouched since the last time she used it. She climbed a step stool and mounted it high on the shelving unit, angled down at the floor space near the door, wired it into an outlet where nobody would think to look. Then she tested it twice, checking the picture on her phone, checking the audio, making sure every word spoken in that room would come through clean. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She wanted proof first. Then people. The next evening, right on schedule, the bell rang. Wilson walked in first, Tedford a step behind him, and Scarlett felt her whole body go still and sharp the way it used to before a patrol. No folded paper this time. No pretend bureaucracy. Wilson didn't even bother with the act anymore. "Friday's tomorrow," he said. "You got my money?" "I don't owe you anything." Wilson's jaw tightened. He walked closer, past the counter, toward the stockroom door, right into the frame of the camera she'd hung the night before. $800, he said. "Cash, in an envelope, or I promise you, we come back here Saturday morning, and we find something in that stockroom of yours. Drugs, stolen goods, whatever we need to find. And once we find it, this store closes. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what we write down." "That's a threat," Scarlett said, keeping her voice level, keeping her face flat. "You're threatening to plant evidence in my store." "I'm telling you how things work," Wilson said, and he smiled that same cold smile from 2 nights before. $800 a month keeps things simple. You don't pay, things get complicated. Real complicated. Tedford spoke for the first time, leaning against the doorframe. "Lot of shops on this block learned that the hard way." Scarlett's stomach turned, but she didn't let it show. She thought about the 5 closed businesses Natalie had told her about. She thought about her father's handwriting still on the price tags in the back room. She kept her voice steady. "I need time to think about it." "You've had time," Wilson said. "Friday. Envelope. No more talking." He turned and walked out, Tedford trailing behind him, the bell jingling twice as the door swung shut and then settled. Scarlett stood alone in the store for a full minute before she moved. Then she locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed even though it was still an hour early, and walked straight back to the stockroom. She pulled up the footage on her phone with hands that weren't quite steady and pressed play. There it was, all of it. Wilson's voice, clear as day, laying out the exact number, $800, and the exact threat, planting evidence, closing her store on a lie. Tedford's voice, too, confirming it wasn't the first time. Both faces clear. Both badge numbers visible on their uniforms in the frame. Scarlett watched it twice, to be sure the audio held up clean all the way through. It did. She sat down on an overturned crate in the back room, the phone still warm in her hand, and let herself feel it for just a second. Not fear. Not anymore. Something closer to grim, quiet satisfaction. She had them. on tape, cold and undeniable. But she didn't celebrate. She'd learned that lesson a long time ago, in places far worse than this stockroom. Having the shot lined up didn't mean the fight was over. It meant the real fight was just starting. She copied the file onto a second device that night, hands finally steady again, and hid the original where nobody would think to look. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in almost a year. "Marcel," she said when he picked up, "I need you to hold something for me. Tonight." "It's serious." Marcel Bellwether showed up at 11 that night, same as he used to when Scarlett needed something done quiet and done right. They'd served together. Him, a corpsman, patching up Marines under fire. Her carrying them when they couldn't walk. He didn't ask many questions when she handed him the drive. He just looked at her face, saw whatever was written there, and said he'd keep it somewhere safe. "Nobody else knows about this?" he asked. "Not yet," Scarlett said. "I want to find someone inside the department first. Someone who isn't part of it." Marcel nodded slow. Careful who you trust with this. She already had someone in mind. The next morning, Scarlett waited outside a coffee shop 2 blocks from the precinct until she saw the patrol car she was looking for. Officer Paula Odom Reyes had come into the store a handful of times over the past year, polite, patient, the kind of cop who actually listened when an elderly customer complained about a stolen bike instead of brushing her off. Scarlett had noticed. In a neighborhood that had learned not to trust badges, Paula was the rare one people still waved at. Scarlett flagged her down before her shift started. "I need 5 minutes," Scarlett said. "Somewhere private." Paula studied her, then nodded toward her cruiser. "Get in." Scarlett sat in the passenger seat and played the footage on her phone without saying much of anything first. Better to let it speak. She watched Paula's face change as Wilson's voice came through clean. The threat, the number, the plan to plant evidence. Paula's jaw tightened. Her hands went still on the wheel. "I've heard things," Paula said quietly, once the video ended. "Rumors. Nothing like this. Nothing I could prove." She looked at Scarlett. "Where did you get this?" "My stockroom. Hidden camera. Both of them clear as day." Paula was quiet for a long moment, staring out the windshield at nothing. "If this is real, and it is, I can see it's real. This isn't just Wilson having a bad week. This is organized. This is something bigger." "That's what I'm afraid of," Scarlett said. "Let me think about the right way to move this forward," Paula said. "If I take it straight to the wrong person, it disappears. And you and I both look like liars. I need to be careful." Scarlett respected that. She'd learned patience the hard way, too. Take your time. But not too much of it. Paula promised to reach out soon, and Scarlett stepped out of the cruiser and walked back toward her store, feeling something close to hope for the first time in days. One honest badge. That was a start. She didn't know yet how fast that hope would collapse. She spent the rest of the day running the register, restocking shelves, trying to act normal for the customers who still came in, despite Tedford's stakeouts. By closing time, the store felt calm again, almost. She locked up, checked the safe, walked the aisles once more out of habit. Everything looked fine. Then she noticed the stockroom door. The lock was broken, splintered clean at the frame like someone had put a shoulder into it hard and fast. Scarlett's pulse spiked as she stepped inside, scanning the shelves. Cash register untouched out front. Register drawer full. Nothing missing from the shelves, except one thing. The backup hard drive she'd kept in the desk drawer, the copy of the footage, the second one, separate from what Marcel was holding, was gone. Scarlett stood frozen for a second, staring at the empty drawer, her mind racing through every possibility and landing on only one that made sense. This wasn't a random break-in. Nothing else was touched. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where to find it, which meant someone had talked, or someone had been watched. Either way, word had traveled from Paula's cruiser to to whoever was protecting Wilson in less than 24 hours. Scarlett's hands were steady as she pulled out her phone and called Marcel. "The copy at your place," she said the second he picked up. "Is it safe?" "Untouched," he said. "Why? What happened?" "They broke into my stockroom," Scarlett said, staring at the empty drawer. "They knew exactly what to take." "Marcel, this isn't just Wilson anymore. Somebody inside that department is watching every move we make." Marcel arrived before the sun was fully up, parking his truck around back where the delivery truck used to sit. Scarlett was already there, standing in the stockroom doorway, staring at the splintered frame like it might tell her something if she looked at it long enough. "Show me," Marcel said. She stepped aside. He crouched down, ran his fingers along the broken wood, checked the hinges, checked the floor for scuff marks. He'd done security work for 3 years now, enough to know the difference between a junkie looking for something to pawn and a professional looking for something specific. "This wasn't random," he said, standing back up. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they wanted and exactly where you kept it. No mess, no wasted time, in and out." He looked at her. "That's not a burglar, Scarlett. That's somebody who was told what to grab." Scarlett had already suspected it, but hearing him say it out loud made her stomach turn cold anyway. Told by who? That's the question. Marcel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, thinking. Wilson's a sergeant. Sergeants don't usually have people breaking into buildings on a moment's notice like this. Not clean like this. Somebody with real pull made a phone call. And they made it fast. Scarlett thought back to the cruiser sitting in the car with Paula, the footage playing on her phone. Paula's promise to be careful about who she told. Less than a day had passed. Whoever was protecting Wilson had eyes and ears moving quick enough to hear about that footage and act on it within hours. "They already know who I am," Scarlett said slowly. "They know what I have. And they didn't even bother sending Wilson back to scare me himself. They just took what they wanted and left." She looked at Marcel. "That's not panic. That's confidence. Somebody up that chain isn't worried about me at all. Which means going public right now with what you've got might not be enough," Marcel said. "If this is bigger than Wilson, and they've already shown they can make evidence disappear overnight, you need more than one video. You need the whole picture before you make a move." Scarlett nodded slowly, the plan already forming in her mind the way missions used to, piece by piece, no step ahead of the last one. Natalie mentioned other shops, 5 of them, closed the last 2 years, all black-owned. All had trouble with Wilson's unit before they folded. "You think it's connected?" "I think it's too many to be coincidence." Scarlett crossed her arms, staring out at the empty street through the front window, the same street Tedford liked to park on. "If Wilson's shaking down more than just me, there's a pattern. And patterns leave paper, property records, court filings, something." Marcel was already nodding along, the old instinct kicking in, the same steady focus he used to bring to a triage line, sorting what mattered from what didn't. "I can pull property records, business licenses, see who bought those buildings after they closed, and for how much." He paused. "It'll take a few days to do it right. Quiet, so nobody notices we're looking." "Do it quiet," Scarlett said. "We don't move again until we understand exactly what we're dealing with." Marcel studied her for a moment, the way he used to before a hard call in the field. "You know, if this goes where I think it's going, it's not just going to cost you a stockroom lock next time." "I know. You still want to keep going?" Scarlett thought about her father's price tags, still taped to the shelves. His handwriting faded, but still there. She thought about the folded paper locked in her safe, the towed truck, the fake citations, Tedford's cruiser parked across the street, like a threat with a badge pinned to it. She thought about 5 other shops, 5 other families, who never got the chance to fight back. "I'm not paying them a dime," Scarlett said. "And I'm not walking away either." She flipped the sign on the front door from closed to open, same as she did every morning, and unlocked it like nothing at all had happened the night before. But something had changed. She could feel it settling into her chest, steady and certain. This wasn't just her fight anymore, and she wasn't backing down from any of it. 3 days passed before Marcel called and said he had something worth looking at. They met at Natalie's office after Scarlett closed the store for the night. A cramped room above a laundromat, stacks of paper covering every surface, a corkboard on one wall pinned with addresses and photographs. Natalie had been building this board for months, long before Scarlett ever met her. 5 locations circled in red marker, each one a shop that used to be something and now sat boarded up or gutted for renovation. "Start here," Natalie said, tapping the first circle. "Fuentes Hardware, closed 14 months ago. Owner got hit with fines for a fire code violation that never should have applied to a building that size. Paid what he could, couldn't keep up, lost the lease." She moved down the board. "Bright Smile Dental, 2 doors down from you. Health Department pulled their license over a paperwork error that got fixed in a week. But by then, the damage was done. Patients scattered. They folded 4 months later." Scarlett stared at the board, feeling something tighten in her chest with every name. Same story, different shop, different owner. Always some official reason on paper. Always the same unit showing up right before it happened. "All 5, Marcel said, spreading a folder of property records across the table. "Sold within weeks of closing, and every single one of them sold to the same buyer." He slid a printed page toward Scarlett. A business name sat at the top, plain and forgettable. Weston Ridge Holdings, LLC. Underneath it, a registered agent name and a business address. Scarlett read it twice before it landed. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "It's right there," Marcel said. The registered agent listed for Weston Ridge Holdings was a name Scarlett recognized from the department roster Paula had shown her weeks earlier, back when this was still just about Wilson. Captain Louis Vandermeer, Wilson's own commanding officer. Scarlett sat down slowly in the folding chair beside the corkboard, the pieces sliding into place with a kind of sick clarity. This was never a rogue sergeant skimming a little cash off a few storefronts. This was structure. Wilson didn't come up with this on his own. He was the muscle. Somebody above him built the whole machine and set it running. "He's not shaking people down for pocket money," Scarlett said slowly. "He's shaking them down to make them fail. So the buildings go up for sale cheap. And Vandermeer buys them through a shell company nobody's supposed to trace back to him." "That's exactly what it looks like," Natalie said. "I've been chasing this for a year and couldn't prove the connection. You just handed me the last piece." Marcel leaned back, arms crossed, his voice low. "If that's true, taking down Wilson doesn't end this. He's replaceable. Somebody else steps into that unit next month, and it starts all over again on a different block." Scarlett stared at the corkboard. At 5 names, 5 shops, 5 families who'd lost something they'd built with their own hands, same as her father built his. Her jaw tightened. "Then we don't stop at Wilson," she said. "We go after whoever's holding the leash." The room went quiet for a moment. Natalie looked between Scarlett and Marcel, then finally spoke what all 3 of them were already thinking. "If Vandermeer's involved, this isn't something we can just publish in an article or hand over quietly," she said. "He runs the precinct. He probably has eyes on every complaint that gets filed against his own men. We already know somebody inside knew about your footage within a day of you showing it to that officer." "Paula," Scarlett said. "She's still the only person inside I trust." "Then we use her," Marcel said. "Carefully. If Internal Affairs gets this evidence properly, documented, filed the right way, it goes on record whether Vandermeer wants it to or not. That's how you force something like this into the light. You make it official before anybody has a chance to bury it." Scarlett looked back at the corkboard one more time, at Fuentes Hardware, at Bright Smile Dental, at 3 more names circled in red that used to belong to somebody who'd worked just as hard as she had. "Set it up," she said. We take everything we have straight to internal affairs. Footage, property records, all of it. Let's see how fast they can bury proof this solid. Natalie was already reaching for her phone. Scarlett didn't feel relief yet. She felt something steadier than that. The same grim readiness she used to carry into a mission brief when the plan was set, and there was nothing left to do but move. 2 days later, Paula met Scarlett in the same parking lot where this had all started, her cruiser idling in the shade. "I talked to someone I trust in internal affairs," Paula said. "Off the record, first. Wanted to feel out whether this would actually go anywhere before we filed anything official." "And?" "He said, if the evidence is what you're describing, it's serious enough to open a file." Paula's hands were tight on the wheel. "So let's file it right." That afternoon, the three of them, Scarlett, Paula, and Marcel, sat in a small windowless room at Internal Affairs, while Scarlett handed over copies of the footage, Natalie's property records, and the paperwork tying Weston Ridge Holdings back to Captain Vandermeer. The investigator taking the report was polite, thorough-looking, nodding along as he wrote. He told them a case number would be assigned by end of day. For the first time in weeks, Scarlett let herself breathe a little easier walking out of that building. It didn't last. 48 hours later, Paula called her, voice tight and low like she was speaking from somewhere she shouldn't have been overheard. "The complaint's closed," she said. "Insufficient evidence. That's the whole explanation. No follow-up interviews, no request for more footage. Nothing. It's like they never even looked at what we gave them." Scarlett stood frozen behind her own counter, the phone pressed hard against her ear. "That's impossible. We handed them video, property records, a paper trail with his name on it." "I know what we handed them," Paula said. "I pulled some threads today. Quiet, careful. Captain Vandermeer has access to review flagged complaints against his own officers before they go anywhere. It's supposed to be a formality, a notification step. Turns out it's more than that. He saw the file. He made a call. It disappeared." Scarlett closed her eyes, feeling the ground shift under a plan she'd thought was solid. The system that was supposed to catch men like Wilson had a door built right into it for men like Vandermeer to walk through and shut it from the inside. "There's more," Paula said, and her voice dropped even lower. "Wilson knows you filed it. I don't know how, but he knows it was you." Scarlett didn't have to wait long to find out what that meant. The next morning, her cashier, a quiet 19-year-old named for one scene and one scene only, a kid Scarlett had hired the summer before to help with mornings, called in near tears. She'd been stopped outside the store the night before by 2 officers who accused her of pocketing cash from the register, threatened her with an arrest right there on the sidewalk in front of neighbors. It took Scarlett showing up with the till receipts, timestamps proving every dollar accounted for, to get the officers to back off. No charges filed, no apology given either. Tedford started following Scarlett's car after that. Not parking outside the store anymore, driving behind her, 2 cars back, all the way from the store to her apartment, and sometimes further, no longer bothering to hide that he wanted her to notice. Scarlett noticed. She made sure to notice out loud, narrating his plate number into her phone's voice recorder every single time, building one more file to add to the growing stack. But she understood the message underneath all of it. Filing the right paperwork through the right department hadn't slowed Wilson down at all. If anything, it had sped him up. Proof that the internal system wasn't broken by accident. It was built that way on purpose, with an escape hatch reserved for exactly the kind of man who needed one. That evening, Scarlett sat in her back office long after closing, staring at the growing folder on her desk. Footage, property records, a closed IA complaint stamped insufficient evidence, and now a new page documenting Tedford's plate number 3 separate nights in a row. Going through channels hadn't worked. Playing by the rules hadn't worked. She thought about her father, who'd never once in 15 years asked anybody for permission to protect what was his. She picked up her phone and called Natalie. "Internal Affairs buried it," Scarlett said the moment Natalie picked up. 48 hours, and it's gone like it never happened. There was a pause on the other end, then Natalie's voice, steady and sharp. Then we stopped trying to fix this, quietly, from the inside. It's time to make noise loud enough that nobody inside that building gets to decide what happens next. I want to talk to someone with real power, Scarlett said. Somebody who can't just make a phone call and disappear this. I know exactly who to call, Natalie said. Councilwoman Ruth Orban Lindsay. She's been asking questions about that precinct for over a year. She just never had proof solid enough to act on. Scarlett looked down at the folder on her desk. Thick now, undeniable. She's about to get some, Scarlett said. Natalie set up the meeting for the following Tuesday, inside a small conference room at City Hall with the blinds drawn. Councilwoman Ruth Orban Lindsay was already seated when Scarlett and Natalie walked in. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, reading glasses pushed up into gray-streaked hair, a legal pad in front of her, already covered in notes from an earlier meeting. I've been trying to get a straight answer out of that precinct for over a year, Ruth said, without much of a greeting. Every time I ask about closures on that block, I get told it's a coincidence. Bad economy, bad luck. She looked at Scarlett. I don't believe in that much bad luck. Scarlett laid it all out on the table. The footage first, playing Wilson's voice loud and clear through her phone's speaker. Ruth's face didn't move much while she watched, but her hand tightened slowly around her pen. Then came the property records, the shell company, Vandermeer's name buried inside the paperwork like something meant to stay buried forever. Then the closed internal affairs complaint, stamped insufficient evidence in under 48 hours. When Scarlett finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. This isn't a bad cop, Ruth said finally. This is a business model. That's what we think, Natalie said. And it's not stopping. Not with what happened to her IA complaint. Ruth set her pen down and looked at Scarlett directly. I can't arrest anybody. I can't force internal affairs to reopen a closed file. But I can call a public hearing. I can put this in front of the council, in front of cameras, in front of people who can't just make a phone call and bury it the way Vandermeer did. She paused. It won't be easy. It won't be quiet. Once this goes public, they will fight back, hard, and you should know that before you agree to it. Scarlett thought about the towed truck, the fake citations, the cashier nearly arrested on the sidewalk, Tedford trailing her car home 2 nights running. They were already fighting hard. At least this way, the world would be watching. Set the hearing, Scarlett said. I'm not afraid of a fight I can actually see coming. Ruth nodded once, satisfied, and reached for her legal pad again. 2 weeks. That gives us time to prepare testimony properly, and gives my office time to make sure this doesn't get quietly killed before it ever reaches the floor. Natalie's article ran 3 days later. The full pattern laid out in print for the first time. 5 shuttered businesses. The shell company. The same unit's name attached to every single closure. It picked up traction fast, shared and reshared, then swept up by a regional outlet with a much bigger readership than Natalie's own paper. For the first time, people outside the neighborhood were talking about what had been happening inside it. The pressure worked faster than Scarlett expected. 2 days after the article ran wide, word came down that Sergeant Wilson had been pulled off patrol, placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. Scarlett heard it first from Paula, who called sounding almost giddy with disbelief. His cruiser's gone, Paula said. Off the schedule completely. I don't know how long it'll last, but it's something. That evening, Scarlett stood behind her counter and watched the street outside her window, empty of Wilson's cruiser for the first time in weeks. No Tedford parked across the street either. She let herself feel something close to relief, warm and unfamiliar after so many days of bracing for the next threat. Paula stopped by later that night, off duty, still in her civilian clothes, and leaned against the counter while Scarlett restocked shelves. Don't celebrate too hard, Paula said quietly. Reviews like this get quiet sometimes right before they disappear completely. I've seen it happen before, with other complaints, other officers. Vandermeer's smart. He knows how to make something look like accountability without it actually costing him anything. Scarlett heard the warning underneath the words and didn't dismiss it. She'd learned a long time ago that a quiet stretch on any front line usually meant somebody was regrouping, not surrendering. Then we keep building, Scarlett said. Hearings in 2 weeks. We use every day of it. Paula nodded, but the worry didn't leave her face. Outside, the street stayed empty and still. The first real quiet Scarlett had felt in a month. She didn't trust it. Not yet. 1 week before the hearing, Paula called Scarlett's cell just after 9 at night, her voice tight in a way Scarlett hadn't heard before. "We have a problem," Paula said. "A big one." Scarlett stepped into her back office and closed the door. "Tell me." "The department's legal team already has your testimony outline. The evidence list, too. Footage, property records, all of it, laid out exactly the way Ruth's office had it drafted for the hearing." Paula paused. "I only know because a friend in the records office mentioned it in passing today, like it wasn't even a secret. Like everybody already knew." Scarlett sat down slowly, her stomach dropping. That outline only existed in 4 places. Me, Marcel, Natalie, and Ruth's office. "I know," Paula said. "Which means somebody in one of those 4 places is talking to the other side." Scarlett didn't sleep much that night. By morning, she'd called an emergency meeting at Ruth's office, the same conference room with the blinds drawn, everyone's faces tighter than the last time they'd sat around that table. Ruth listened to what Paula had learned, her jaw set hard the entire time. When Paula finished, Ruth didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she reached for her office phone and made a call in front of them, short and clipped, asking someone to pull financial disclosure records for her own staff. The answer came back within the hour, and Ruth's face went pale reading it off her assistant's laptop screen. "My chief aide," Ruth said quietly. "Daniel." She turned the screen so the others could see. Campaign contribution records, small amounts spread out over more than a year, all traceable back through a chain of donor names to Captain Vandermeer. "He's been feeding information to the department," Ruth said, her voice shaking with something between fury and disbelief. "Not because he's dirty, in the way Wilson is. He's been trying to keep the department happy with my office, protect the relationship. He probably told himself it wasn't a big deal every single time he did it." "It's a very big deal," Scarlett said flatly. "He handed them my testimony before I ever gave it." Ruth closed the laptop, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm removing him from this today. I should have caught this sooner. I'm sorry. This is on me." Scarlett appreciated the apology, but it didn't undo what was already done. "What does the department know exactly?" "Everything," Paula said quietly. "Your evidence list. The order you plan to present it. Which means they've had a week to prepare a defense against exactly what you're bringing." Marcel, who'd been quiet through most of it, finally spoke. "Your footage is the centerpiece of this whole case. If they know it's coming, they've had time to find a way to attack it." "Attack it how?" Scarlett asked. "It's real. It's clean. Wilson's own voice, his own threat, on tape." "Doesn't matter if it's real," Marcel said. "Matters if it's admissible. You recorded that conversation without telling them. Some states require both people to consent to being recorded before it can be used. If this state's one of them, a lawyer could argue the whole thing gets thrown out on a technicality before anybody even gets to the truth of what's on it." Scarlett felt something cold settle into her chest. She'd built this entire case around that footage, the reveal that started everything, the proof she'd been so certain nobody could argue away. "You're telling me they might just throw it out?" she said slowly. "Not because it's false, because of a rule." "I'm telling you it's possible," Marcel said. "And if their lawyers already know it's coming, you can bet they've had a week to build that exact argument." The room went quiet. Ruth looked between all of them, her earlier fire dimmed by the weight of what they were facing. "We could postpone," she said. "Give ourselves time to prepare for this properly." Scarlett thought about Wilson, reinstated soon enough if this dragged out much longer. She thought about 5 closed shops and a shell company still sitting untouched, still profiting. Every single day this took longer than it needed to. "No," Scarlett said. "We've got a hearing in a week, and now they know exactly what we're bringing." "Fine. We go in anyway. We bring everything we have, and we make them fight for every inch of it in front of cameras, where they can't just quietly bury it the way they buried the IA complaint." Ruth studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, some of her resolve returning. "Then we prepare like our backs are against the wall," Ruth said. "Because after today, I think they are." 2 days after the leak came to light, the group made their final decision. Postponing would only give Vandermeer more time to prepare, more time to bury whatever else they hadn't found yet. They would go forward as planned, evidence flaws and all, and trust that the truth carried more weight than a technicality. The night before the hearing, they gathered at Adamson's corner market after closing. The front lights dimmed, the register drawer sitting open and empty on the counter beside stacks of paper. Natalie arrived first, laptop already open, running through the questions the council members were likely to ask. Paula came next, out of uniform, carrying a manila folder of her own notes on department procedure, ready to testify anonymously behind a voice modulator and a blurred camera feed Ruth's office had arranged. She still looked shaken from the past week, but she hadn't backed out. Scarlett respected that more than she said out loud. The last to arrive was a man Scarlett hadn't met in person before, the retired appliance store owner from 5th Street, the one Marcel had spent weeks quietly earning the trust of. He walked in slow, cautious, glancing at the door behind him like he expected somebody to be following. Marcel introduced him simply, and the old man shook Scarlett's hand with a grip still strong despite his age. "I heard what happened to your truck," he said. "Happened to mine too once. Different way. Same story." He agreed to speak at the hearing, but only in general terms. He wasn't ready to say Vandermeer's name out loud, not yet, not in a room full of cameras. Fear like that didn't disappear just because somebody handed you a microphone. Scarlett understood. She didn't push him. They spent hours going over it. The order of testimony. The footage Marcel would present alongside a full explanation of how it was recorded, hoping the context might soften any legal argument against it. Natalie walked through her article point by point, ready to back up every claim with a document if challenged. Ruth had sent over a summary of council procedure, so nobody would be caught off guard by the format of the hearing itself. Around midnight, they took a short break. Scarlett made coffee in the back office, the same room where she'd first watched Wilson's threat play back on her phone weeks earlier. Paula leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, quiet for a moment. "You scared?" Paula asked. Scarlett thought about it honestly before answering. "A little. Not about tomorrow going wrong. About it going wrong and nobody caring anyway." Paula nodded slowly. "I keep thinking about what happens to me after this. If they find out I gave you that footage review, gave you anything at all, I could lose my badge over it. You didn't have to do any of this," Scarlett said. "I know," Paula said. "That's exactly why I did it." They sat with that for a moment, and then went back to work, because there wasn't time left for anything else. By 1 in the morning, they'd built a plan that felt solid. Testimony in order, evidence backed up 3 separate ways. A coalition of 5 people willing to stand in front of cameras and say what most of the block had been too afraid to say out loud for 2 years. Scarlett felt something she hadn't let herself feel in weeks. Real hope. Not the fragile kind. The kind built on preparation. The kind she trusted because she'd built it with her own hands, same as her father built this store. Marcel stayed behind after the others left, double-checking the footage file one final time, confirming timestamps, confirming the audio held up clean start to finish. He had no way of knowing yet that none of it would matter in a few hours, that the department's lawyers already had a plan sitting ready, built during the week they'd stolen from the leak, aimed squarely at the one piece of evidence Scarlett had trusted the most. "We're as ready as we're going to be," Marcel said, closing his laptop. Scarlett looked around the empty store, the counter where Wilson first slid his folded paper across, the stockroom door still bearing the scars from the break-in, the safe where it all started. "Then let's go finish this," she said. She locked up for the night, the folder of evidence tucked under her arm, unaware that everything they'd built over the past 3 weeks was about to collapse in a single morning. The council chamber was fuller than Scarlett expected. Rows of folding chairs packed with reporters, neighbors, a few faces she recognized from the block. Ruth sat at the head table with the other council members. Cameras lined the back wall, red lights blinking, exactly the kind of audience Scarlett had hoped for. She didn't know yet how fast it would turn against her. The department's attorney stood before Scarlett ever got called to speak. He was calm, polished, a man who clearly did this for a living. He raised a motion before the hearing even opened for testimony. The footage Scarlett planned to present, he argued, had been recorded without the consent of all parties, a clear violation of state wiretapping law. Inadmissible, improper, tainted evidence that shouldn't be allowed to influence a public proceeding. Ruth argued back hard, citing exceptions, precedent, anything she could find on short notice. But the council's own legal counsel, cautious and by the book, sided with the objection. The footage was struck before Scarlett ever got to play it for the room. Scarlett sat frozen in her chair, watching the one piece of proof she trusted most get erased with a single ruling. It got worse. The attorney produced a report next, typed, official-looking, claiming Adamson's Corner Market had multiple unresolved health and safety violations dating back months, long before any of this began. Scarlett knew instantly it was false. She'd never received notice of any such violations, but the report had a case number, a date stamp, the appearance of legitimacy, and the room didn't know any better. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The narrative shifted in real time. Not a woman fighting corruption, but a business owner with something to hide, lashing out at legitimate enforcement. "That report is fabricated," Scarlett said when she finally got the floor, her voice steady despite the fire building in her chest. "I have never seen it before today." "That's a serious accusation," the attorney said smoothly. "Do you have proof it's fabricated?" She didn't. Not yet. Not sitting in that chair with the clock already against her. Then Paula's turn came, seated behind a screen, her voice run through a modulator to protect her identity. She'd barely started speaking when the department's attorney interrupted, producing an internal access log, proof that Officer Odom Reyes had reviewed restricted footage without authorization weeks earlier, a clear violation of department policy. The leak. Ruth's compromised aid. It had given them everything they needed to gut Paula's credibility before she said a single useful word. A Captain Scarlett didn't recognize stood from the gallery and formally suspended Paula on the spot, in front of the cameras, in front of everyone. Paula's modulated voice cut off mid-sentence. The screen went dark. Scarlett watched her walk out of the side door minutes later, badge already surrendered, face white with shock. The old man from 5th Street never got the chance to speak at all. He sat in his chair through the whole collapse, watching what had been done to Paula, to Scarlett, to the footage they'd all trusted, and when his name was finally called, he shook his head and stayed silent. Scarlett didn't blame him. She'd seen what fear did to people who'd already lost everything, once. Across the room, Wilson sat in the gallery in plain clothes, arms crossed, a small, satisfied smile on his face the whole time. Word had already spread that he'd be reinstated to full duty by the end of the week. He didn't even bother hiding how pleased he was. The hearing ended in chaos, reporters shouting questions nobody answered, Ruth banging a gavel that did nothing to restore order. Scarlett walked out into the hallway, feeling like she'd been hit by something she never saw coming. The folder of evidence useless in her hands. Natalie's follow-up article ran 2 days later, but it barely made a ripple. Buried within a news cycle by an unrelated shooting story, the department's press office fast-tracked to every outlet in the city that same week. Scarlett didn't think that was coincidence either, but she had no proof of that. Same as everything else. She stood outside the empty hearing room afterward, Paula beside her, silent, suspended, staring at nothing. Marcel leaned against the wall, jaw tight, saying nothing because there wasn't anything left to say. Scarlett felt the weight of it settle into her chest, heavy and familiar, the kind of loss she hadn't felt since the desert. But somewhere underneath the weight, something else stirred. A memory of a shoebox mentioned once, almost in passing, sitting untouched in an old man's closet. Paper. Receipts. Something that had never touched a hard drive, never been part of any evidence list a leak could hand over in advance. Scarlett straightened up, the fire coming back into her eyes. "I know where we go next," she said. The next morning, Scarlett drove straight to 5th Street, to the small house behind the boarded-up shell of the appliance store the old man used to run. She hadn't called ahead. She didn't want to give anyone time to talk her out of asking. He answered the door in a robe, surprised to see her, but he stepped aside and let her in without much hesitation. His living room was small and neat, photographs on every wall, a wife who'd passed years back, grandchildren, a younger version of himself standing proud in front of a store with his name painted across the window. "I keep thinking about yesterday," he said, sitting her down at his kitchen table, "about what they did to that officer, about what they tried to do to you." "That's why I'm here," Scarlett said. "You mentioned once, when Marcel first talked to you, that you kept some paperwork from when you sold your building. I need to see it. All of it." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his own hands folded on the table. Then he stood, walked to a hall closet, and came back carrying a shoebox. The cardboard soft and worn at the corners, like it had been handled many times over many years. He set it on the table and lifted the lid. Inside were receipts, folded and yellowed. A stack of canceled checks held together with a rubber band gone brittle with age. And underneath all of it, a single sheet of paper, notarized, dated a little over 2 years back. The sale agreement for his building. Scarlett read it slowly, her pulse climbing with every line. The sale price sat far below what the building was worth, even accounting for the neighborhood, even accounting for the state of the market at the time. And the buyer listed on the agreement, plain as anything, was Weston Ridge Holdings, LLC, the same shell company tied to 5 other shuttered businesses on the block. "They came to me first," the old man said quietly. "Before the fines, before the citations. Told me my license was about to get pulled over some paperwork issue, and it'd go away quiet if I just sold to them instead of fighting it. I was tired. My wife had just passed. I didn't have the fight left in me that you've got." Scarlett looked up from the paper. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that now," he said. "Didn't feel that way then." Scarlett held the sale agreement carefully, like it might crumble if she gripped it too hard. This wasn't a video that could be challenged on a technicality. This wasn't something a leak could hand over in advance for the department to prepare an argument against. This was paper, real, notarized, sitting untouched in a shoebox for 2 years, completely outside anything Scarlett had ever shown anyone. "Can I borrow this?" she asked. "All of it. I'll keep it safe. I promise you that." The old man studied her for a long moment, the same fear in his eyes that had kept him silent at the hearing. Then something shifted in his face, something that looked a lot like the fight Scarlett had noticed missing a moment ago. "Take it," he said. "I'm done being quiet." Scarlett drove straight from 5th Street to Marcel's apartment, the shoebox on the passenger seat, like it was something fragile enough to break. Marcel met her at the door and she laid everything out across his kitchen table without a word first, letting him see it the way she had. He went quiet, reading through it, more careful this time than he'd been with the footage weeks earlier. He photographed every page, logged the date and time, wrote out exactly how the documents had come into their possession and from whom, building the kind of clean chain of custody that would hold up against any lawyer looking for a technicality to exploit. "This ties Vandermeer directly to the sale," Marcel said finally, looking up. "Not through some shell company nobody could ever prove he controlled. His signature's on the closing paperwork himself, right here, plain as day." Scarlett felt something settle into her chest, steady and certain. The same feeling she used to get right before a plan came together clean. "They already showed us their whole hand at that hearing," she said. "They know how to attack digital footage. They don't know this exists at all." Marcel looked at her, understanding exactly what she meant. "Then we build something they can't see coming twice," he said. Scarlett pulled out her phone and called Natalie first, then Ruth, already picturing the second hearing taking shape in her mind. Evidence they couldn't challenge, testimony they couldn't leak, a mistake they wouldn't get the chance to repeat. Ruth met them the next day with her office door closed, and her face harder than Scarlett had seen it before. She'd already removed her chief aide, Daniel, from her staff entirely, walked him out herself the morning after learning about the campaign contributions. No severance speech, no second chances. "I trusted him for 3 years, Ruth said, setting a folder down on her desk, the shoebox documents already inside it, photographed and catalogued by Marcel. "I should have known better. But I promise you, nobody in this office is going to make that mistake again." Scarlett believed her. The fire in Ruth's voice wasn't the careful, measured tone from their first meeting weeks ago. This was personal now, for all of them. "We need this next hearing to be different," Scarlett said. "Not just stronger evidence. A different setup entirely. Last time, they knew everything we were bringing before we walked in the door. That can't happen again." "It won't," Ruth said. "This time, we don't file a public evidence list in advance. We request the hearing, we state the general nature of the complaint, and we hold every piece of proof close until the moment we present it. Legally, we're allowed to do that. I should have insisted on it the first time." Natalie, sitting across the desk with her laptop open, had already been working on the next piece. "I want to live stream this one, not just publish an article after the fact. Stream it in real time, unedited, straight to as many viewers as I can pull in. If they try to bury the story again with some convenient distraction, it won't matter. People will have already seen it happen live, with their own eyes." Scarlett liked that. A story that got buried after the fact could disappear. A story unfolding live, in front of thousands of people watching at once, was much harder to make vanish. "There's one more piece we need," Scarlett said, thinking of Paula, suspended and quiet since the collapse of the first hearing. "Something that ties Wilson's whole unit directly back to Vandermeer. Not just the property sales, the structure itself. Who built it? Who staffed it?" She called Paula that evening. Paula answered on the second ring, her voice careful, guarded in a way it hadn't been before her suspension. "I don't know how much more I can do," Paula admitted. "I'm not on the inside anymore. I don't have access to anything current." "You don't need anything current," Scarlett said. "Think back. Before all this happened, did you ever see paperwork on how the business liaison unit got formed? Who assigned who to it?" There was a long pause on the line. Then Paula spoke slowly, like she was pulling the memory up from somewhere she hadn't thought to look in weeks. "I remember something," she said. "Before my suspension, I still had access to old internal assignment logs. Routine stuff. Nothing classified. I pulled a copy once, months ago, just out of curiosity, because I thought it was strange how fast that unit got approved and staffed. I never thought anything of it at the time. I might still have it saved." She found it within the hour and sent it over. Scarlett opened the file at her kitchen table that night, scrolling through pages of routine department records until she found what she was looking for. The formation order for the Business Liaison Unit, dated, signed, and authorized personally by Captain Louis Vandermeer. Staffing decisions listed right alongside it. Wilson's name, Tedford's name, all of it straight from Vandermeer's own authority, on record, months before any shop on that block ever closed its doors. Scarlett sat back in her chair, the pieces of the whole case laid out clean in front of her for the first time. The shoebox tied Vandermeer to the property's sales. The assignment logs tied him to the unit itself. Natalie's live stream would make sure nothing could quietly disappear this time. And none of it, not one piece, depended on the footage that had already been thrown out once. She called Marcel, then Ruth, then Natalie, laying out exactly how the second hearing needed to unfold, piece by piece, no gaps left for anyone to exploit. Everyone agreed. Ruth set the date for 1 week out, the fastest the council calendar would allow. Scarlett hung up the phone and sat alone in her kitchen a long moment, feeling something steady settle into her chest. Last time, she'd walked into that hearing room hopeful and unprepared for how hard they'd fight back. This time, she knew exactly what was coming. And she'd built something they had no way of seeing before it hit them. 1 week later, the council chamber filled again, fuller this time, word having spread about what happened at the last hearing. Natalie set up her camera at the back of the room, a small red light blinking to show she was already live. A counter in the corner of her screen climbing steadily as viewers joined from across the city. Scarlett sat at the front table between Ruth and Marcel, the shoebox documents in a sealed folder in front of her. No public evidence list had gone out this time. No leaks. No warning. Captain Vandermeer walked in himself, confident, in full uniform, taking a seat near the department's attorney like a man who expected an easy win. He'd beaten Scarlett once already. He clearly believed he'd do it again. Ruth opened the hearing without announcing the specifics of what was coming, keeping the department's lawyer guessing right up until the moment Scarlett stood and requested to enter a new track of evidence. Documents, she explained, entirely separate from the footage struck down at the last hearing. The attorney rose immediately to object, reaching for the same wiretapping argument that had worked before. "This isn't recorded audio, Counselor," Ruth said calmly. "It's notarized paper. Feel free to review it." He had no argument ready. He hadn't known it existed. Scarlett laid the sale agreement on the projector for the whole room to see, the price far below market value. The buyer listed plain as day. Weston Ridge Holdings, LLC. Then she pulled up the internal assignment log Paula had saved months earlier. Vandermeer's own signature authorizing the formation of the Business Liaison Unit, Wilson and Tedford listed as his personal staffing choices. The room went still. "Captain Vandermeer," Ruth said, turning toward him directly. "Can you explain your signature on this closing document? Purchasing a property from a business owner who alleges he was pressured into selling under threat of a fabricated license revocation?" Vandermeer's composure cracked slowly at first, a tightening around his eyes, a shift in his posture. He tried an explanation about routine investment, personal finances unrelated to his department role. But the assignment log sat right beside the sale agreement on the screen. His name on both. The timeline lining up too cleanly to explain away as coincidence. The old man from 5th Street, seated in the gallery this time, stood on his own without being asked, and spoke plainly into the silence. "He came to me himself," the old man said, his voice shaking but clear. "Told me my license would disappear if I didn't sell to his company. I have the receipts. I have the checks. I kept all of it." The room erupted in murmurs. Natalie's viewer count kept climbing, comments scrolling faster than anyone could read them. Vandermeer's attorney tried to interject, tried to steer the hearing back toward procedure, but the council members were no longer listening to procedure. They were watching a man's story fall apart in real time in front of thousands of people. Then Wilson, seated near the back in plain clothes, stood up. Every head in the room turned. "I want to say something," Wilson said, his voice tight, his eyes locked on Vandermeer rather than the counsel. Everything I did because he told me to. The fees, the threats, which shops to hit and when. It was never my operation. I just ran it. Vandermeer spun in his chair, face white with fury. Sit down. No, Wilson said, and something in his voice cracked open. Years of following orders finally giving way under the weight of watching his own captain try to leave him standing alone. You're not letting me take this by myself. The room descended into chaos. Reporters shouting, council members demanding order, Ruth banging her gavel again and again. Two officers who'd been posted at the chamber doors moved forward at the council chair's direction, first toward Vandermeer, then toward Wilson, neither man resisting, both looking smaller than they had an hour before. Scarlett stood at the front table, watching it unfold exactly the way she'd built it to. No gaps left for either of them to slip through this time. Natalie's livestream kept rolling, capturing every second, unedited and undeniable, the same way Scarlett's stockroom camera had once caught Wilson's threat weeks earlier. Except this time, nobody could break in overnight and make it disappear. Thousands of people had already watched it live. Marcel leaned toward Scarlett as the chamber emptied around the two men being led out. You did it, he said quietly. Scarlett watched Vandermeer disappear through the side door, his career and everything he'd built on the backs of people like the old man from 5th Street collapsing in the same room where he'd once tried to destroy her. We did it, she said. 1 week later, the charges against Vandermeer and Wilson were formally filed. Extortion, fraud, abuse of official power, a list long enough that the local news read through it in 3 separate segments. Vandermeer's bail hearing made headlines on its own. Wilson's cooperation with prosecutors, once he understood he wasn't walking away from this quietly, gave the district attorney's office everything they needed to build the case fast and clean. Scarlett watched most of it from behind her own counter, the register humming along like it had before any of this began. Paula's reinstatement came through a few days after the arrests, along with back pay for the weeks she'd been suspended, and a formal commendation for what the department now called, carefully and without much detail, assistance in an internal investigation. She stopped by the store the afternoon she got the news, still slightly stunned, badge clipped back onto her belt like it belonged there again. They actually said thank you, Paula said, half laughing, half like she still didn't believe it. After everything. You earned it, Scarlett said. The hard way. The old man from 5th Street received a visit from Ruth's office not long after, promising a formal restitution process for the building he'd been pressured into selling. Ruth made sure of it personally, unwilling to let his case get lost the way so many others had before Scarlett ever walked into her office. He came by the store once just to see it, standing outside for a long moment before he came in and bought a pack of gum he didn't need, just to have a reason to shake Scarlett's hand again. Tedford, it turned out, hadn't built any of it himself, just followed orders, same as Wilson claimed he had. He was quietly reassigned to a desk far from any storefront on that block, stripped of the parts of the job that had let him make people afraid. No headlines followed him out. He simply wasn't there anymore, and that was enough. Natalie's article ran in full the following week. No distraction fast-tracked to bury it this time, no leak to blunt its edge. It carried her name across the front page of the regional paper, the whole pattern laid out plainly for anyone who'd doubted it before. 5 shops, 1 shell company, 1 captain, and the ex-Marine, who refused to let it stay buried. On a quiet Saturday morning, Scarlett climbed a ladder outside her store with a hammer and a small box of nails, her father's original hand-painted sign resting against the brick beside her. She'd taken it down years ago during a renovation and never quite found the moment to put it back up. Today felt like the moment. A few neighbors gathered on the sidewalk to watch, word having traveled the way it always did on that block. Natalie was there with her camera, though this time she kept it lowered, letting the moment be what it was instead of a story. Marcel stood near the curb, arms crossed, the same steady look on his face he used to wear watching Scarlett come back from something hard. Paula leaned against her own car, off duty, smiling for the first time in weeks, without any weight behind it. Scarlett didn't make a speech. She wasn't the kind of person who needed one. She lined the sign up carefully, drove the first nail in, then the second, her father's faded lettering catching the morning light for the first time in years. Someone in the small crowd murmured something as she climbed down, low enough that Scarlett almost missed it. A line she recognized instantly, twisted back on the man who'd first said it. Things happen to shops that don't cooperate. Scarlett looked out at the sidewalk, at the faces gathered there, at a street that had spent 2 years learning to be afraid and was finally starting to unlearn it. She thought about her father, about the price tag still taped inside in his handwriting, about every shop on that block that never got the chance she'd fought for. She stepped back from the ladder and looked up at the sign. Adamson's Corner Market, it read. Same as it always had. Same as it always would. She unlocked the front door, flipped the sign from closed to open, and stepped inside as the evening lights came on above her. Steady and unafraid. Exactly where she belonged. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.